Yep.
Yeah, so why don't we start with a Maori karaku?
Okay, so this is a karakia that Wiramu's taught me recently, and maybe I'll explain a little bit about it after I've completed it.
Let me turn off my phone. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm ready.
E pā. Te mātua tua uri o te whaioio o tini o te mano. Tūkuna tō wārua ki rere ki ngā taumata. Hei arahi, hei tohu tohu, I roto I mātou hui. Hui te marama, hui te oranga, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. So the way I understand this karakia, Lewis, is e pā means father. Te mātua tua uri o te whaioio o tini o te mano. So this is the parent of everything, the smallest things and the biggest things. Tūkuna tō wārua ki rere. Let your spirit flow to all the highest places. Hei arahi, hei tohu tohu. This is about guidance, leading us in the right direction. Hui, so this for this hui, hei hui te marama, hui te oranga. So hui te marama is about light. Bring light to this meeting. Hui te oranga, bring well-being. And then the end of the karakia goes, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. This is about, are we all agreed on this? And then it brings it all together, and yes, we are.
Beautiful. Very beautiful. So maybe I should sing a song back.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I can do that. Tunkan wau e no yo he. Tunkan le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Wa mai an kai o le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Ina wau e lo yo he. Ina le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Wa mai an kai o le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Ate wau e lo yo he. Ate me mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Wa mai an kai o le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Ko la wau e lo yo he. Ko la le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. Wa mai an kai o le mi e cha. Wau e lo yo he. So that's an invitation song. And Tunkan, or spirits, literally it means big. And Ina is matrilineal lineage, Ate is patrilineal lineage, and Kola are those who love you, those who care for you. And so, Ina, it says, take a look at us, because we're standing here in an existential sense. And, we've come here to be seen. And so we ask you to take a look at us. And so it speaks to those 4 quadrants. And it's a kind of a song that's sung in the beginning of things.
That's beautiful, Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. I learned in New Zealand when I was visiting that you always respond to a song with a song. Why? And so when we did the ritual entrance to the marae, so they would sing, and then we would advance, and we would sing a song in Lakota, and then they would sing back in Maori, and we would advance and then sing a song in Lakota. And it was really quite remarkable, that sort of back and forth thing that happened. The thing I loved about doing workshops in New Zealand was that the first 3 hours are just entering and singing in the marae.
Yeah.
And then eating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I learned New Zealand culture. Lots of singing.
Yeah, and there's so much connecting in that, isn't there?
Oh my, yes. Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the representations of the ancestors are all around the marae on the wall. And so there they are watching.
Yeah.
Which is way cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, I guess, bring this whole conversation about ancestors being present with us into a sort of a physical presence of those carvings and all the I guess the conversations as well.
Indeed. And I just did a paper which I hope to send to the British, that journal that you've been telling me about.
Yeah.
About human relationships with other than humans.
Yeah.
And the consciousness that entails. And so I thought, I'm hoping that'll be something that would fit in. But it seems like it might.
Have you got some did you submit it yet?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you submit the article yet?
To the journal? No.
Okay.
This weekend.
Let me know if you're looking for some possible, because they asked for 3 referees or 3 people who, and I might talk to some Australian colleagues who might be good people to put down. I've just been thinking about that. Yesterday, I sent you an article from Lydia. I don't know if you saw that yet.
I did. I liked it.
The way that came about was a colleague of mine in the World Psychiatric Association is a professor in Nairobi. And he's worked, his name's David Ndeti, and he's worked with traditional healers in Kenya and tells some quite interesting stories about his experiences of that. And he has got Lydia and myself and a colleague from Ghana to write a chapter for his mental health textbook on traditional healing.
Oh, wow.
And so I then, during the lockdown last year, he put me in touch with Lydia, and I've been working with her to develop that narrative.
Wow.
So that narrative is taken out of our chapter.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
But it's interesting because she's a Christian pastor, and it's probably a fairly conservative branch of Christianity, but she's also very strong on her indigenous traditions.
It's interesting. I'd love to hear more about how she negotiates that.
Yeah, me too.
Send me her contact and I'll invite her to my podcast.
Yeah, she was, I asked her if she'd be okay with me sending the article to you, and she said she was, but she was keen to know what you thought. So if I send you the email, you could write to her directly.
Right, I could do that, definitely.
And she's a remarkable person. She's doing a heck of a lot of work in the community. She's involved in government committees trying to negotiate how the system will be a bit regulated. And yeah, she's involved in lots of things, and one really wonderful person.
We need to collect wonderful people. I think
Yes.
that's been my new hobby, is to start collecting wonderful people.
I've been thoroughly enjoying listening to some of your podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
I listened to the one with is it Linda McGreg? No, the Māori philosophy lecturer.
Oh, Micah, Carl Micah?
No, actually the other one.
Oh, the Georgina Stewart?
Georgina, that's right, Georgina.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't she
very good, very interesting. And also Donald Fixico, I had listened to that one. And I listened to some of your presentation to the Anthropologists Association.
Yeah. That was a fun presentation.
So I've included some of that material into the chapter that I've been writing, that which I also included your a couple of paragraphs about your work as well.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah.
So what I was thinking about for today, it would be good for us to have a bit of a conversation before we finish about the conference. We've got a couple of pages that we didn't finish on your chapter for our future book. If it would be okay to go through that.
Oh, definitely.
And I was wondering if we could just have a look at the 2 paragraphs I wrote about your work, to see whether you're comfortable with that material being in there.
For sure. Those are the 2 that you sent me.
Yes.
I was fine with those.
Okay. So it's possible there could be some changes to that, but it sounds like you're comfortable with the 2 paragraphs that I sent you.
I am. Yeah. Because since I don't know what I do, I figure if whatever you say about what I do is probably more accurate than what I would say.
Well, look, it's lovely that you're supportive, and it's funny because I feel I've been feeling slightly out on a limb. It feels like, Wiremu and I have been trying to put on paper some written documentation of wairua from different parts of the world, for spirituality, and the fact that it's not a thin description. There are a whole lot of different descriptions.
Right.
And so a lot of the North American literature that I was able to find was Lakota. And so I've prepared some material about black elk and John Fire Lame Deer, and I've also got Archie Fire Lame Deer's book, and then I got Mary Crow Dog, and then Joe Eagle Elk, and then you. And yeah, I'm wondering whether you would be okay for me to send you a number of pages, maybe 7 or 8 pages, which includes that material, just for you to have a read through, and you could say to me, hey, look, I think what you said about black elk's a bit off beam, or the way that you word, there are nuances of how you word things, and the even language like Lakota and Sioux and Oglala and how you use those things. There are often nuances to that which you can get wrong as an outsider.
Right, right. Well, we don't just erase the word Sioux, because that's
I've cut that out.
yeah. And Oglala is a branch, it's a subgroup of Lakota.
Yeah.
So there's Oglala Lakota. And but there's other subgroups of Lakota too. And there's 7 divisions. There's Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, Miniconjou, and Teton, I believe. I hope I'm right. I guess that's 5. There might be 2 more. But what's interesting is that the 3 that I understand the best, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota. So you would say, like, the word for friend in Lakota is kola, but in Dakota it's koda, and in Nakota it's kona. So there's this interplay between the L's and the D's and the N's, and some other subtle differences too. But everyone understands each other. So and I guess they call them Siouxan languages, though no one likes the word Sioux. So someone has to figure out how to get rid of that. But
presumably that's what the white guys were naming the Sioux.
It's the ending of it's an ending of a French word that was insulting. And SIOUX is a clear French ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just wondering what to do about that. I could email it to you right now and you could have a look through, or while we're together, or would you prefer for me to just send it to you afterwards and you can have a look?
Send it afterwards, and let's just keep the conversation going because it's fun.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, thank you. So I will. The other thing, I'm interested in your thoughts because you've done lots of writing. With both you and Lydia, at the moment, the way I've written it, I'm not explaining our connection. And yet in a lot of the book, we're providing context. So I'm not sure how you would. I mean, in some ways, I feel like if we write it slightly more formally, it's not about just talking about my friends. It's about someone who's published seriously and etc. It's a slightly more academic. Have you got any thoughts about that? You've done lots of writing.
I do, and it's very interesting that you should bring this up because there's a class that I'm co-teaching at the University of Maine. It's a seminar on arts and medicine. And last night we had a scholar, Patricia Levy, speak to the class, who's famous in this arena. And she was talking about how things that are academic reach no one, that the average academic paper is read by 7 people, one of which is the author, and 3 of which are the reviewers. And she's saying, screw this. I mean, but we need to write for the world. We need to stop. We just need to stop. We just need to stop this academic nonsense and just write to the world and be public scholars instead of secretive scholars.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so right on, you know,
Hmm.
that okay. So let's say we write something that's highly academic and we think that it will change the world. No, it won't, because only 7 people will read it.
Hmm.
No one, you know. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking, you know, she made me understand my books better because I was trying to write the stories. Like she does something called fiction research, where
Hmm.
she interviews a lot of people and then creates fictional characters to summarize their experience. And I thought, you know, I was doing something similar to that in Coyote Medicine, Coyote Healing, Coyote Wisdom, where I was writing about the experience of people who found healing, and I was changing all the proper nouns around so no one would recognize them.
Yeah.
And it therefore it sort of verged on fiction, you know,
Hmm.
sort of like, you know, that concept of limits in calculus where you converge on a value, you know, with progressive iterations. And and I thought this is something we need to pursue.
Hmm.
You know, we 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 can write about, you know, what's important is the verbs and not the nouns.
Hmm.
And um, I just recently heard an interview with a fellow I knew from Saskatchewan. Uh, Henderson is his last name. And he said, I can talk for 4 hours in my language and never use a noun. And I thought, wow,
Wow.
that's cool. And so I think what we're looking for is to move toward descriptions of things that capture the process. And academic writing is all about making bigger and longer nouns and making more and more nouns. And you know, who needs them? We need verbs. And
Hmm.
I don't know, I think Wittgenstein sort of spoke to this, you know, in his
I was
aha.
I was reading about what you said at the beginning of healing the mind about Wittgenstein,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that actually,
Yeah, he said, why use
making
jargon?
it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple and use ordinary language and get rid of jargon.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Patricia Levy was talking about. It's like, let's communicate instead of obfuscate.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got an editor who volunteered after reading our first book to help us out, and she's all for that, which is great.
Yeah. So I would recommend going less academic because
Yeah.
the ones who need the more academic won't read it anyway.
Yeah.
They might come to a meeting where you're speaking and say, this sucks, this is stupid. And if you say,
Yeah.
well, have you read it? They'll say, no.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like I want to move in that direction of just you know, following in the footsteps of Wittgenstein and just writing for ordinary people and saying, this is what I'm doing, you know,
Mm.
and this is what I think. And here it is. And, you know, like it's counter hegemonic. It's
Yes.
and you know, we just so have to do away with all these hierarchies. It's
Yeah.
it's just so oppressive in academia, as you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of happy not to be in the middle of that. I don't, because I'm not actually employed by a university very much. I don't have to write articles or stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and I'm
hopefully,
sort of in the same place as you. I'm at the margins of the university.
yeah,
So, I co-teach a class. I do some research through the university. I take a class,
yeah.
but I'm not, it doesn't, I'm not in their promotion system.
Yeah. Lewis, I've just got a side question for you. The healers that I've listed from La Kota, which I managed to get some written material about, do you know any Canadian First Nations healers who might have written about voices and visions or other experiences?
I'm sure there are. I know some about, about whom I've written, but they didn't write anything. I'll have to look for that. I know people who could know. Rennie Linkletter could know. And she wrote a marvel. I don't know. Have you read Rennie Linkletter's book, Decolonizing Trauma?
No, but I know that she's on your email list.
Yes, she's part of the conference. And she wrote Decolonizing Trauma is about 10 contemporary Indigenous Canadian healers. And Rennie would know if any of them had written something.
Okay.
And I would suggest writing Rennie because you've got her address because she's on the.
Yep. Very helpful. And I'll also get hold of her book.
Yes, it's a marvelous book. And I'm trying to think of other people.
So is she a First Nations person?
Yes, she's from Rainy River First Nation in
Saskatchewan, or no, Ontario.
in
Northern Ontario.
northwestern Ontario.
Hi there, Barb.
Barbara says hi. Ghost.
Hello.
Here, I can just be ahead if I do this right.
If you do it right.
Yes. It's slightly surreal, I have to say, but it's very nice to see you.
Well, we so want to come visit you. We're so hoping that New Zealand will open this in 2022.
I think it's heading in that direction, unless the Omicron thing pulls the rug on stuff. But I'm really hoping you guys can come, and we've definitely got space for you to come and sleep here and dine with us. And yeah, we've got rooms for you guys.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. And I just have this, I don't know, there's so much cool stuff happening in New Zealand, like Carl and Micah and Georgina Stewart and you guys. I mean, what you and Wiramu are doing is just amazing with your first book and now your second book. And Adrian Giacon with their like Hearing Voices network that's totally Maori based.
Yep.
Yeah, just so much fun stuff.
I must get in touch with her as well. I'm wondering the end of the chapter, which I sent you. Would you be okay if we just have a look through it, partly to see if there's any other material you want to add to it?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay. Now, I'm going to get it up on the other computer. He's not sounding so hungry now.
No, he ate. He would eat constantly if he could. If he could,
Yes,
he'd be as big as
we've got a dog like that.
he lives to eat. Do you think dogs are like horses, that they would just eat themselves to death if they could?
I think it's possible that our one might.
I think ours would too. We named him Sabaka Raskolnikov because we rescued him, and we created this fantasy story that he was Raskolnikov's dog. And when Raskolnikov went to Siberia, somebody needed to take care of his dog. And so we
That's a good story. So with this chapter, Lewis, this is kind of where we got up to. And it sounds like you've had a read through this last 3 and a bit pages. And there may not be much that you want to add to it. The first one is, have you got it in front of you? Otherwise, I can just read it out.
You can read it out. That seems fine.
Okay. I haven't had many scary experiences. I remember once in college, I had a terrifying encounter with a spirit during the night in this house one time. It was kind of wound up in a bad dream too, but I remember saying, and then I've added, in the midst of my dream, this really happened. I will wake up in another room. And I did. And I said, well, that really happened. So I talked to my grandfather and he said, you are just not burning enough sage. And so I was just, so I've made a comment. I'm a little confused by the last 2 sentences. Can you please suggest a change to make this clearer? Do you remember that incident that you were talking about and what your grandfather meant?
I do. And I think it was a time in my life when I felt relatively disconnected from people. I was at Indiana University and I was living in a house. I still remember the address. It was 424 East 9th Street in Bloomington, Indiana. And this was in 1971. And, you know, I was a young man looking for love in all the wrong places and getting rebuffed constantly. And I wasn't really happy. And I had this sort of, I had that experience that was both, it was simultaneously a dream and a waking dream. And I think it was real because I did end up in a different room when I woke up. Now, as psychiatrists, we would say that I just didn't remember walking into the different room. And you know that. Because we can't accept sort of transpersonal explanations for anything. But it was a very frightening experience. And I think it motivated me towards some change, towards some positive change, because I never had that experience again.
Can you explain a bit more about what your experience was of the spirit? How did you know it was there?
It was a very terrifying, frightening sort of demonic in the classical sense spirit who was tormenting and torturing me and taunting me and proclaiming that all would come to ruin and nothing good would ever happen and I would be destroyed and ha ha ha. Sort of a classic Iktomi character, though I didn't know anything about Iktomi at the time.
Sorry, what's that character you're talking about?
Iktomi is a Lakota character, Spider-Man. He's classic signature. He wears buckskin trousers with fringe on all of his 8 legs. And you can imagine what a difficult tailor job. But Iktomi's job, what Iktomi does is to mock people. And Iktomi mocks anything that the creator wants. And Iktomi opposes anything that creator wants or anything that's good or tries to co-opt or subvert or somehow undermine anything positive. And, he's got terrible parentage. There are reasons for him, for his, he was the product of a rock and an ugly sea monster, Tehi and Ea. And, he was sort of destined to badness, you might say, from his parentage. So one has to feel for him a bit. And, but I didn't know about Iktomi at that time. And it was...
one of the reasons I'm interested in this, Lewis, and I'm thinking about it for this document, is that I've been talking with people recently, and this is to do with our book, about the distinction between spiritual experiences which are positive and ones that are negative.
Yeah.
And there are some people, I think, who are familiar with spiritual things, but they might say, well, the positive ones are probably spiritual and the negative ones might be psychotic. And I've noticed that Wiremu doesn't agree with that.
I wouldn't agree with that either.
Yeah.
I think
Wiremu's kind of saying, well, there are bad spiritual things and we have to deal with them.
Yeah, exactly. There are bad spiritual things and we have to deal with them.
And so that's why I thought, because mostly your spiritual experiences in this story are kind of positive or neutral. Right. Whereas this is probably the single example of something which felt negative, apart from the nun, who wasn't very negative.
No, she was all right. I mean, but I do remember, I don't know if we talked about this, I wrote about it in one of my books. Once upon a time, I was doing a ceremony with a woman who had AIDS and hepatitis C and had a severe alcohol problem. And we were doing a ceremony on a beach in the city of San Francisco, but an isolated beach in the northern part of the city. And this was when I was practicing there. And one of the most evil beings that I've ever encountered emerged in that ceremony. Just absolute evil. And I just burned a lot of sage and sang really strongly and loudly and rattled and drummed and it passed. But I realized at that time that there is evil in the world. I wrote a paper about that. It inspired me to write a paper about encounters with evil. And I do think that evil exists in the world. I mean, the classic photograph I have is of the mass burial at the massacre at Wounded Knee to describe evil. And of course, the Shoah is ultimate evil. And we can't.
Sorry, what was that? Sorry, what's the?
Shoah, the Holocaust.
Oh, yes.
Shoah, is that not a common word?
Not to me. Is
Okay.
that a Hebrew word?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just the name that I had been using for the Holocaust because so many people use it, the Shoah. But yeah, I mean, that's absolute evil. And,
Yeah.
and I think what settler colonial capitalist enterprises are doing to the earth is absolute evil. You know,
Yeah.
deforestation,
Yeah.
all of those things. And we can't be Pollyannish and say evil doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's here. It's real. These spirits are among us. You know, that the Dene believe that they can't go back to spirit world, that there's a filter that keeps them here. You know, which is why they call the evil that you have Chinle. And they believe that when a person dies, their Chinle stays here and their spirit goes to, you know, the spirit world. And that's why they board up hogans, where when someone dies, is to prevent the Chinle from getting out and to prevent people from getting in and picking up someone else's evil. And so I don't think evil is psychotic. You know, I think evil is real, and we just have to do our best to manage it, avoid it, deal with it. And, I mean, you know, I have to say, I think that I had an incredible upbringing by my grandparents, and they gave me a kind of strength and ability to persevere that so many people whom I know, you know, in my generation didn't get because they didn't have such wonderful grandparents.
Yeah.
You know, but I think we can't whitewash evil.
Yeah.
I don't think it came from Creator. I don't know. My grandmother said it came from us. We made it. She said Creator. She always told me Creator wouldn't do that. That's a human thing. You know, she believed that Creator was good and pure, and humans invented evil. And I suspect that she's close to being accurate. You know, there are stories of, there's stories of supernatural evil beings that pre-existed humans. And I suppose we have to give that credence. And in the Western United States, Coyote got rid of a lot of them because that was Coyote's job. A lot of people don't know that Coyote's principal job was to get rid of dangerous monsters that could threaten humanity. A job which he did really well, because look at how many people there are. But yeah, you know, I feel fortunate. I mean, I think my grandparents gave me a strength to resist sort of decompensation.
I'm every time I've read your material, including in your books, but also in this chapter. I've really enjoyed that connection that you have with them.
Yeah, they were marvelous people.
Yeah. And your grandmother, and the way she just created space for things, and the way she liked to go to church, because even though it wasn't very nice listening to the diatribe from the minister.
She liked the songs. She loved the
Yeah.
songs. And I remember one of her favorite songs was Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
And she loved Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Yeah.
She wasn't very Christian, actually, but she loved the songs.
Yeah.
I think the funniest thing I may have told you is that one day she said to me, she said, "What's all this fuss about Jesus rising from the dead 3 days later?" She said, "Your Uncle Gad, when he died, he rose from the dead 3 days later, and I saw him, and he walked down the street, and nobody started a religion about him. So what's the big deal?"
That story's at the very beginning of the chapter.
Oh, good.
I think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't know. She just respected all of creation. She had that deep respect for creation.
Yeah.
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 I remember. This is probably also. I already told you this also. She always said that the Christians had it all wrong. That it was Mary who had the big deal because she was the mother.
Yeah.
Jesus was a minor player compared to Mary. I suspect a lot of feminist Catholics would agree with her at this point.
Absolutely, I'm sure. Now, Lewis, I'm aware that it's now 11 o'clock here, which means 5 o'clock there. And I think we've got through one paragraph on this bit.
We can keep going. I'm good.
You're right for us to keep going at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to read the next bit.
Okay.
So I put a subheading, being unwell. And when I mention I've put a heading or I've added in a sentence, please just let me know if you'd like to change it. Being unwell. I think what happens is that if you're unwell, you can draw unwell spirits to you. And if you're basically well, you may draw well spirits to you. Most of my life, with just a few exceptions, the spirits that I've encountered have all been friendly, helpful, or just ignoring me and not caring. They're not scary. However, I remember once I was doing a ceremony for an older woman with AIDS and end-stage alcohol disease. This is your example.
Mm-hmm.
She was extremely sick at the time and died not long afterwards. During the ceremony, a spirit came out, and I put in brackets, of her.
No,
Was it out of her?
it's not of her. It came out from her, but it was
Yeah.
not of her. It was its own
Yeah.
entity. I thought of it as like the spirit of AIDS, alcohol, like it was an alcoholism, AIDS. It was just a bad being that combined like the worst of AIDS and the worst of alcoholism.
Yeah. During that ceremony, a spirit came out from her, and that spirit was terrifying. It felt like a really bad spirit. I just started burning sage like you couldn't imagine, just smoking up the place. I was scared for maybe a week that it might try and drag me down. So I just kept burning the sage and cedar and just praying, and it all turned out fine. That was a really scary spirit, and it stands out for me as one of those terrifying encounters. I think really evil entities are not that common, but when you run into one, you really know.
Yeah. I suspect nowadays, I think they're more common, but I think humans are deteriorating rapidly.
Yeah. And we're probably creating an environment where they might thrive.
Yes. Well, we created COVID, I believe, with our feedlot sort of putting so many animals together that the virus is, figured out how to transmit to humans. And with the global warming accelerating their mutation rate and, pollution contributing. And I mean, I think we're creating our own destruction. And I don't know that we'll smarten up in time to stop it.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to keep going with the story about the Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm.
Another time I remember doing a ceremony for a man who was suffering from Lyme disease. We invited a spirit of Borrelia burgdorferi to come, and we had somebody that we had prepared to let it occupy him and speak through him. The spirit or chief of the parakeet said, "Look, you guys are messing up our environment, and so we're going to mess with you." He said, "Get rid of this pesticide or we're going to do you in." I responded, "Well, how do we work out a truce for this guy right here? I mean, he's a nice guy and he won't use any more pesticides." The spirit responded, "All right, we'll leave him alone." He didn't seem to be at all evil. In fact, in some ways it was pretty funny, actually. The man's Lyme disease disappeared for a year and he felt fine. Then he came back to me as he'd got really sick again. When I asked him, he admitted that he'd been putting pesticides on his lawn again. I said to him, "Why did you do that?" It was obvious he didn't get the idea of it. When we made a contract with a spirit, it is a lifetime contract and you better not renege on it.
Yes, that is so true. Like you just, and that's in so many fairy tales or mythologies, legends, whatever we call them, that if you disobey the spirits and you open Pandora's box before time, something terrible happens.
Yes.
There's so many versions of Pandora's box. I just told a Russian story today about eagles and merchants and urns, and don't open them until you get home. And it's such a common theme that if you open the box before you're permitted, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole story of Pandora's box, of course, the Greek story. But it has parallels in every culture in the world that I've encountered. And, we just have to follow instructions. Sometimes we just have to follow instructions.
Next heading, experiences of people and places. When I get a feeling about a person, that's a beginning to the sentence that I added. At this point in my life, I always like to look inside myself and ask, is this a prejudice? Am I really getting information, or am I just prejudiced against this person? I try and examine that carefully. But apart from that, I think many people can get feelings about people and places. I think that kind of information coming to you if you are unwell could make you paranoid, because it would seem like it was coming from nowhere maybe, or from the CIA or somewhere like that. When I was young, any place my grandfather smoked a cigar felt good, and the Baptist church felt really bad. I went to the Baptist church because my grandmother liked to hear the singing. She loved those hymns. I remember once she took me there and the minister was talking, and she told me not to pay any attention to what they were saying. She said, "Honey, if there's a hell, it is here on earth. Besides, you have already been there. Remember that day we went to hell for certain?" There is a town in Kentucky by that name.
There is indeed. And it's on hell for certain.
She had a very nice sense of humor, your grandmother.
She did.
Yeah. I'm sure she still does. My grandmother liked the singing, but she didn't like the hell philosophy. She said, "Honey, Creator wouldn't do something like that. Only people could imagine something like that." In the Baptist church, there was something that felt very, very bad to me. Looking back, I'm sure it was fear I was smelling, because I didn't live in a world of fear. I lived in a world of wonder. My grandmother had a really set routine. She got my grandfather off to work, then she washed all the dishes. After that, she sat down with her coffee and she prayed at the kitchen table. Once she was done praying, you couldn't tell her anything negative. If you tried, she would say, I already prayed today, I'm not taking anything new in. Or she might say, I already gave it all up to Creator. I don't want to hear anything more. If you've got a problem, you tell me tomorrow morning and I'll pray over it, but not today. It's all done for today. She even said, if you turn everything over to Creator and then keep being negative, it's an insult to Creator and your prayers might not be answered.
Right. Yes.
I can just imagine people reading this and really loving it. Certainly how she taught me was, you say your prayer, then you walk away. You leave it there, you don't mess with it. And the beginning of the next sentence I've just added as an editing ad. Alongside the Baptist church, there were certain people who scared me, and sometimes I saw the devil in them. And then I've added, it was something I could sense about their energy. I found my grandfather's boss scary. Looking back now, I know he was a kind of melancholy alcoholic. However, back then I found him a bit frightening. My grandfather worked at the Chevrolet garage owned by this man, and I would sometimes hang out there and play. Whenever the boss came around, I would stay close to my grandfather and stay out of this man's way. I find it hard to describe my experience of him, except that it felt to me like he had a bad energy. He was never verbally abusive that I saw. One day I worked up the courage to ask him how he got the Model T Chevrolet up onto the top of the roof of the garage. And he said he drove it up there. And then I've added as a final sentence, but even though I didn't see him behaving in a mean or nasty way, I had a strong feeling about that.
Yeah, that's true.
Overall, I would say that I view the world as generally a friendly place because most of the spirits I come across are friendly. And that is what my grandmother taught me. She said it's people you should be scared of. However, sometimes I come across bad spirits, and that comment didn't have a finish to it. But maybe it's just sometimes I come across bad spirits, full stop.
Yeah, and have to negotiate the interaction. I mean, and we do that in a lot of different ways. I mean, we do that through burning sage, through prayers, through songs, ceremony. They exist. And one Lakota elder told me that the most evil spirit in the world is Homo economicus, which is that imaginary creature that John Locke created, the rational economic man who maximizes his income at the expense of everything and everyone. And I think that's true. I think the ultimate villain in our world is Homo economicus, which is the construction, the spirit that was created by settler colonial capitalism to dominate and subjugate and profitize the earth for them. And if we disappear as a species, it will be due to Homo economicus.
Yeah. I'm very happy that this is all getting recorded onto your transcription.
Me too.
I'm enjoying all this. That's great. Thank you. So now we've got half a page to go.
It's good.
Now I've added in this explanation at the beginning of the sentence. As a psychiatrist, when I talk to people who are hearing voices, it doesn't matter too much to me if the voice comes from a spirit or whether it's a auditory hallucination. Do you want to say so-called auditory hallucination?
I would say so-called auditory hallucination.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of I recently talked to a man whose wife had died from an overdose, which his estranged wife had died from an overdose, who her new boyfriend had given her. And he was distraught. And she appeared to him several times and talked to him. And the psychiatrist who saw him diagnosed him as schizophrenic and gave him more drugs than you can imagine. And when he got out of the psychiatric hospital, because he was distraught over his wife's death and came undone, when he got out, he stopped all the meds that they gave him, and he got a whole lot better. And we were talking, and I said, well, have you had other visual phenomena? He said, no. And I said, well, that was a spirit. That was your wife's spirit talking to you. Because if you were like crazy and hallucinating, you would see more than that. You would see something, you would see more than one consistent entity who was saying positive things to you.
Yeah.
Because she was telling him, it was all right and take care of the children and, positive things, nothing negative. And not to blame himself, it was a very uplifting visitation. And I was like, well, that's not a hallucination. That doesn't count as psychotic phenomena. That's spirit visitation. But, our colleagues don't understand that. I mean, many of our colleagues.
Yeah. This is great. The rest is really great. Just a digression is that for the last chapter of our book, I'm hoping to write some guidance for psychiatrist colleagues who, and I've been, I guess, focusing on a Māori context. I mean, how would you know when it's time to involve a Māori healer? That kind of idea when you're interviewing someone. And so I would love to be able to run that past you. It's like 2 or 3 sheets of some ideas about that. And at some stage, I don't want to totally flood you today, but at some stage I'd be quite keen to get your perspective on, do you agree with this stuff? Because I guess what I'm trying to do is convey something that's sensible, but doesn't try to be too clever. But you see what you just described about, well, you would have a whole bunch of experiences and they wouldn't be all making sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's actually a pretty sensible rule of thumb.
Yeah, because the essence of psychotic is disorganized. And I think if one believes in the invisible realms, it's not that hard to differentiate visitations from psychotic visions. It has to do with the level of organization and the quality of the messaging.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we're so enmeshed in this empiricist, positive, rationalist way of thinking, in which nothing exists that's not concrete. And we just don't accept anything spiritual.
Yeah.
Asterisks, there's, exceptions all over the place. You and I are two exceptions to the rule. And yet, I mean, so like today, I made a home visit on a woman who is essentially psychotic. I mean, she imagined all kinds of people coming into her house who don't, as far as I can tell. Though I believe maybe spirits come into her house, and maybe she's perceiving accurately in the spiritual dimension, but it's making her completely dysfunctional in the ordinary world. And I plan to keep talking to her about these visitations, but in the short run, to keep her from being evicted, I prescribed olanzapine.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think you would have probably done the same. Because in the short run, we need to shore her up and get her a little more organized and make sure that she doesn't lose her housing, you know,
Yeah.
from like crazy behavior that would here cause the pipes to freeze if you don't keep your heat on.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll continue the discussion. I hope we will. And
Yes.
maybe we'll discover who these beings are who are flooding her house, but they're not actual physical beings from her environment externally, you know, because there's enough external viewers that no one's coming into her house.
Yeah.
You know, no physical being is entering her house against her will. So how do we move that discussion to, are there spirits coming into your house? Well, you know, if she were Maori, we would pose the question to Wiramu.
Yes.
You know, and in my context, there's not a lot of elders. So I'm
Lewis, you would potentially be tuned into that yourself, though. Did you feel today in her house that there could be some spiritual explanation for her experience?
I did. Yes. Yes. And this is something that's really crucial for a psychiatrist to explore, which is this: what happens when different dimensions merge for people and they find themselves in multiple dimensions at the same time, and what they report sounds crazy to rational people, you know.
Yeah.
And yes, we can medicate them so that, I mean, the medication seems to dull the capacity to be multidimensional.
Yeah.
And that can be a good thing. I mean, that can keep them out of hospital, which is a good thing. And it
help
can
them feel more calm.
Help them feel more calm, keep them out of jail, you know, for some
Yeah.
people who might act on these visions. So
Keep them from freezing their pipes.
exactly. And you know, you and I agree that medications have their place in this society, because in my way of thinking is that it's because we don't have true villages who can, we don't have the kind of community that can surround and engulf someone. And so we're stuck with trying to manipulate their brains however we can, to keep them from suffering more, getting in deeper trouble. And yet at the same time, I want to explore, who are these beings who are flooding her house, and where are they coming from, and how is she attracting them, and could we figure out a way for her to either welcome them, accept them, or attract them less? And that will unfold over time. I don't know. Yeah.
This is exactly in the territory of the book that we're trying to put together. And I would love to at some point have a conversation with you about the other material, which is really straightforward. It's nothing, there's no rocket science in it, but finding ways of expressing it like you just have, it's not straightforward.
Right. And being open to multidimensionality is not common in our profession. No.
Is it okay if I just carry on with this bit, Lewis?
Yeah.
Yep. So a question about whether a voice comes from a spirit or whether it's an auditory hallucination. I think we still have to deal with it and what it is saying no matter what. I'm more interested in what we are going to do. I find it really helpful to try and get people to put a body to the voice because it's less frightening that way. If you can see a body or a form connected to the voice, then it's easier to resist the voice. I often ask people to tell me about that. For example, how tall is the being that is speaking? How wide? What color? I'm always trying to get lots of detail. If we can identify friendly voices to counteract the negative ones, then that's great. For instance, I remember I was the psychiatrist for, I was seeing this woman. I've just changed it to I was the psychiatrist for. Is that comfortable for you?
No, that's fine. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Who wouldn't heat her apartment.
Mm.
In northern New England, that is a problem in winter because it gets down to -40. So if you don't heat your apartment, your pipes will break and your landlord will be really angry at you. I asked her, why won't you heat your apartment? She responded, there is this voice that's telling me that I need to suffer like my ancestors did who were in the Holocaust. They were in the concentration camp and they didn't have anything during the middle of winter. So why should I have anything? In those days, we had a whole wall full of puppets, and I suggested she pick out a puppet that looked like that voice. And she picked out the T-Rex puppet. I said, you must have at least one ancestor who wants you to be warm, lest their suffering be in vain. And she said, yeah. So I said, well, pick that one out. And so she picked out a little bunny rabbit. Then I said, well, it's hard for a little bunny rabbit to stand up to T-Rex. So how about if I'd loan you one of my spirits for a week? And she said, which one? And I said, Kung Fu Panda, because he would never take on evil warlords without first eating his noodles.
Stop. Take it. She actually said that, not me. I said, which one would you want? And she said Kung Fu Panda.
Wow, okay. That's cool to make that distinction.
Yeah, yeah.
And did she say the thing about the noodles, or did you say that?
I said the thing about the noodles. Yeah. She picked Kung Fu Panda. And
Yeah.
that was, and you might add that that movie had just come out and was really popular at the time.
And she'd seen it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I added the part about, and he would never go fight evil without eating his noodles.
Yep. And I know why you added that. So I gave her the Kung Fu Panda puppet. And with this sort of idea, because she was somewhat loopy like me, she totally bought into the idea that I had put the spirit into the puppet that I was sending home with her. And it was going to be really pissed off if there wasn't heat. And so she turned on the heat.
Indeed, she did. Yes.
I mean, I think you've probably written about that story elsewhere, but I think it's a lovely story.
I don't know if I've written about it elsewhere. So, feel free to use it.
It's a wonderful story. Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation, Lewis. And we've got to the end of that chapter material. And so what I would be thinking about doing with that is when I get a chance in the midst of writing this other book, I will, and when I've got the material from those two transcripts from our audio today, I'll incorporate some of that material into the chapter. And then at some stage, maybe when you're over here, I'll sit down with you and get you to just have a read through it. And then see if there's anything else to add.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
We've gone through, you've had a look at the materials for the, you've looked at the two paragraphs. I'm going to email you all the Lakota material, which I'd be grateful for any comment that you've got about it.
Okay.
And at some stage, I'd love to have another conversation where we look at some of that guideline material and just hear your comments about it.
Sure. Do you want to schedule another conversation while we're on the? Because.
Oh, look, if we can, that would be.
Yeah, we
brilliant.
can. I'm somewhat flexible these days. Here, I'll stop the recording because.
Yeah.
I'll start the recording.
And there's an interesting word in the first line of this karakia, which is hihiri. And there's a story about a tohunga called Māori Marsden, who was also a Anglican minister.
Oh.
And he came back from the Second World War, and he was talking to his tohunga and the elders kaumātua in the far north where he came from. And they were talking about the meaning of hihiri, which is energy. But it's not just any old energy, it's a profound kind of energy. And they then related it to, I think maybe Māori was then talking about the detonation of the atomic bomb in Japan. And they were talking about that these scientists had learned how to rent the fabric of the universe in a way. But they asked the question, have they learned how to put it back together again? Which of course they had not. And so I'm just interested in that kind of meaning of hihiri, which is also, I guess, the kind of life energy as well. Anyway, and po refers to like a pillar or something really solid that we can hold on to. Me inoi tātou. Po hihiri, po rarama, te aho I roto, marama I roto. Tēnei te po, ko te po ka eki, nā te po o tēnei karakia. Ka māti ariki, ka māti tauira. Hui te marama, hui te oranga, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. So the po to me is almost like a metaphor for creator. It's that solid thing that's with us.
Yeah, Carl Micah talks about it as darkness, out of which everything emerges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's actually a different word. Po,
Oh.
P-O.
Oh yeah, P-O. So you were saying another word.
I was saying po, which is P-O-U.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I get it.
But po is also very interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Look.
Look.
A song with me to end this.
There you are.
Okay, I'm gonna get Barbara to sing us. We're gonna sing an ending song from us.
What's that?
Fantastic.
Come sing a song with me to finish this off. The Day and the Night song.
What is it? What are we finishing on?
This discussion with me and Allister. Day and the Night song? Yeah. Okay. One verse of each, maybe. Drum, 2 verses of each, maybe. Up to you.
Tonka
Sheila wopilaye, ompe tukile wakanye, mitakuye o mazanikaye, wopilaye. Tonka Sheila wopilaye, ompe tukile wakanye. Nitakuye o mazanikaye obilaye. Unchimacha wobilaye ahepikile wakonye. Nitakuye o mazanikaye obilaye. Unchimacha wobilaye ahepikile wakanye. Nitakuye o mazanikaye obilaye. Okay. That's the Day and the Night thank you song, and it thanks It acknowledges that there's a shift change, and it thanks the day spirits and the night spirits. So Ampe Tukile this day, Hahe Pikile this night, and Wopilaye, thank you. And so
That's so wonderful. And thank you, Barbara, as well. And that's very appropriate because it's day here and it's night with you.
absolutely.
And we can thank both.
Yes, we can thank both. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, Lewis.